Michael, first on this Amazon versus Trump issue, let's put on screen some of the other examples of President Trump using his power of the office to pressure companies or criticize companies that he's at odds with. Do you see a connection here between the Amazon attacks and some of the other companies he's been battling with as president?
Absolutely, and it goes beyond that as well. I see it as of a piece with his directives to the Justice Department about who they should investigate, his attacks on Andrew McCabe, the deputy FBI director who was fired at the Justice Department. I mean, this is a presidential peak, government by presidential peak rather than policy. And, you know, the problem is that it undermines whatever legitimate policy goals the president might have in mind, because it comes off as him just attacking his enemies. Look, on the Amazon issue, there may well be legitimate issues to debate about what the pricing policy should be for Amazon's shipments, its impact on retail stores, or whether it's paying its full fair share of sales taxes. All these are legitimate questions. But when it comes off as Trump going after Jeff Bezos because he doesn't like what the Washington Post is writing about him, it undermines whatever he's trying to accomplish, and it's really it's a mirror image in a way of the way Vladimir Putin runs Russia. Companies in favor, oligarchs in favor, get the benefits. Those who aren't are imprisoned or prosecuted, and it's the flip side of that, and it's quite serious.
Well, look, the Bezos Post connection, this Amazon issue, it calls to mind AT&T and Time Warner. Time Warner, of course, CNN's parent company. Time Warner is in the process of being bought by AT&T, but the Justice Department under President Trump is suing to block the deal. We've been through about a week of the trial so far, and this is going to go on for several more weeks, and then we'll see what the judge decides. The question all along has been whether President Trump's disdain for CNN is somehow a factor in the government's lawsuit. And I think that's the issue you're raising, Michael.
Absolutely.
There are these sorts of government issues. I'm sorry, what's that?
No, I'm saying it cast a cloud over what the government is trying to do. As in the McCabe example, where, you know, you had an IG report that had findings about Andrew McCabe. We haven't seen it yet. But the fact that the president himself was attacking on Twitter the deputy director of the FBI raised questions about whether the decision to fire him was done for legitimate reasons based on the IG findings, or was as a result of pressure from the president. So any step, similarly with Jeff Bezos and Amazon, any step the Board of Governors of the Postal Service or Congress seeks to does in response will have the same cloud cast over it. Are they doing it because of legitimate policy reasons the president is making, or is it because he's going after a political enemy and they're bowing to pressure from the White House?
Yeah, Amazon, by the way, not commenting. The Washington Post, not commenting. They're just letting his words stay out there. What I think is interesting, Jill, is that some of the president's attacks against companies or other figures, they're not true. They're not based in fact. So you wrote about this for the AP over the weekend. You said Trump is misrepresenting Amazon's record on taxes. Can I ask you, are you tired at this point of writing fact checks about the president?
It's an interesting question. No, I don't think any reporters are, because the truth is important and facts are important, and this is a president who very often will overlook those truths and those facts to make a political point, or in this case, to be able to continue ramming the Washington Post because he's angry at stories that he's written. There's a clear pattern here. The president tends to lash out when the Post publishes a particular juicy story about palace intrigue, as they did this weekend, and it's something that's part of our jobs. Look, we're there, and it's not just you write fact checks. You do it every time you write a story. If the president's saying something, you don't just put it out there for readers without the context of explaining whether it's true or not.
Shouldn't the president have someone by his side to see if his tweets are true before he sends them out? Shouldn't there be kind of a fact checker assistant?
Yeah, I mean, you'd think, I mean, even just a spell checker assistant, we see again and again where the president puts out tweets that contain, I think there was one recently that had like 5 errors in 140 characters. And this is something that John Kelly had tried to do. This is something Kelly had tried to do.
But you know what the response to that is, right? The response is, you're a media elite. Nobody cares about spelling.
Problem is when those kinds of errors then trickle into, if these are official communications from the president, these are official communications from the United States. What does that do to U.S. credibility? Raises all these questions. But this is something that Kelly actually did try to do, where he wanted the president to at least run by tweets. He wasn't going to tell him when he could or couldn't tweet. He just wanted to look at them to make sure that they were actually factual. That obviously hasn't happened. The president often also is not the one who's actually tweeting. He will let, for instance, Dan Scavino, a social media guy, who is at this point pretty much his longest serving aide, someone he's very close to. It'll often be Dan Scavino who's the one actually tweeting, and they just do this in a very haphazard way. And for the president, look, this is the unfiltered way to speak to his supporters, and he doesn't seem to be interested at all in changing that.
Yeah, I was just pulling up this quote from Axios this week that I wanted to read to you, Michael, and see if it rings true to you. This is from Mike Allen's newsletter. He called this Trump's land of make-believe. He said, the president often gets agitated and stirred to action by random things he hears on TV or from shoot-the-bull conversations with friends. It drives staff nuts because they're responding to things that are either inaccurate, highly distorted, or flat out don't exist. Does that sound true to you?
Rings true. I mean, we've seen countless examples of where some random account on Fox News, Saturday Night Gene Pirro show, or Sean Hannity, which has only a marginal connection with reality, then gets echoed and amplified by the president on Twitter. Look, it didn't just drive John Kelly and his staff nuts. It drove his lawyers crazy because, especially when it gets into the Mueller investigation and the Russia connections, he has made life more difficult for him. We haven't yet to hear from John Dowd about all the reasons that he was the president's top lawyer who resigned just a week or so ago.
That's a good point. We haven't had an exit interview from him.
No. And we probably won't, attorney-client privilege, but you have to believe that that the president's tweets clearly complicated his job and made it much more difficult to deal with all the issues that, and remember, the president has a depleted legal team right now. He can't hire the top flight lawyers that he's tried to hire. He's down to like basically Jay Sekulow, an assistant at this point, as well as Ty Cobb from inside the White House. But I mean, this is not the kind of legal firepower you would want when you're up against a major criminal investigation into your campaign and the operations of your White House.
Michael, I've noticed every time Mueller fades from the headlines for a week or there aren't new indictments for a couple of weeks, there's a conservative media narrative that, Mueller doesn't have anything and the media has moved on from collusion. This week the narrative was, the media is focusing on Stormy Daniels because that's a new way to get to the president because Mueller hasn't found collusion. Can you just get to the bottom of this for me? People have this expectation of instant updates, daily developments, but Mueller and the Russia probe moves at a much different pace, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I think, all indications are Mueller is moving methodically. We actually had a fairly significant legal filing by Mueller this week. It didn't get nearly as much attention because of Stormy Daniels and a lot of other things. But in filing in one of the cooperating witnesses' cases, the lawyer for a major law firm who prepared a report and lied about it to the FBI relating to Manafort's business for Ukraine, you had the filing that that Richard Gates, the deputy to Manafort, was in touch with throughout the campaign, including the closing weeks of the campaign, September, October 16, to a guy who was a known Russian intelligence agent, a guy from the GRU. We talk about this in Russian Roulette about his ties. This is Konstantin Kalimnik, who was basically running Manafort's operation in Kiev, was known as the guy from the GRU, and Gates, Manafort's deputy, was in touch with him in September or October. Now, we don't know the details yet of what those communications were, but that was a significant new filing by Mueller.
So why wasn't that front page news? I mean, it's not as simple as Stormy Daniels.
Well, you know, I think to those of us who are following the Mueller investigation closely, it was highly significant and it got duly noted. I think that, you know, as with so much with Mueller, we don't know what else he knows. We don't know what the nature of those communications were. But the mere fact that you had, you know, Manafort was gone from the campaign by August of 2016. Gates stayed on. He actually was still a top official of the campaign. He was liaison to the RNC, and then he remained, it basically was running the inauguration for Tom Barrack. And we now have this new evidence that he was communicating with a guy who the FBI believed was a Russian intelligence agent. You know, there's clearly a lot more that we will want to know about what the nature of those communications were.